You know, it's tough not to feel a certain way when you read a tweet like this from Elon Musk where he says, if I die under mysterious circumstances, it's been nice knowing you. And in case you missed it, this was likely in reference to a statement from a Russian commander that has been captured in the Ukrainian war. You can see that the commander is insinuating that Elon is somehow supporting Nazi fascist forces in Ukraine with military communication equipment. In this case, it would be Starlink. And for this, Elon, he says, you will be held accountable like an adult, no matter how much you'll play the fool. And immediately where my head goes is, okay, so as Tesla and his other companies continue to grow, Elon has a path towards becoming a trillionaire potentially by 2025. As his wealth grows and his companies become more and more successful, and he has a higher net worth, what is the dynamic going to look like around him? How will societies accept that growth? How will nation states accept that growth? And what I like to do in this video is lay out how Elon can reach trillionaire status by 2025 and what are the potential implications that stem from that scenario. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we deep dive this topic, I want to say that music is one of the most important things in my life, and I know there's a lot of artists out there that have great music. And if you're someone who's interested in sharing their music, I have an email listed right underneath this video right here somewhere. Let's see how good I am at editing, somewhere around here. And if it's something that I vibe with, I look to feature your music in my videos. Now let's sit down and outline how Elon can reach that trillionaire status by 2025. The key variables here that we have to keep in mind is his ownership of Tesla, SpaceX, what's likely to be Twitter, as well as his other smaller companies, and how their potential growth can continue into the future. As of today, Elon's largest holding is Tesla at about $141 billion of his net worth. I got this number by taking a 17% stake times the market cap of the company, which as of today's recording is roughly $830 billion. With SpaceX, it's going to be harder to actually understand what his percentage stake is since the company is private, but based on some of the research I've done, his stake is likely to be somewhere around 50% of the company. And based on the latest research, SpaceX is valued at about $100 billion, which puts his stake at $50 billion. In respects to Twitter, as of this date, there's still some moving pieces as it comes to the deal and taking it private, but Elon will likely have somewhere around 20% stake in the company. At a $44 billion valuation, that stake is roughly $9 billion. If you take his other companies like Boring Company, Neuralink, and any other small companies that Elon has started that we don't know about, those stakes are roughly to be somewhere around $1 billion. And then if we add another $5 billion of what I like to call chump change, which is which is crazy. If you're a billionaire, you're, roughly $200 billion. That's $5 billion is roughly 2 to 3% of your net worth. So he probably has $5 billion in cash and other assets that he has laying around. If we tally up all these valuations, his net worth is likely to be a little over $200 billion as of the date of this recording. Now, let's outline a path for Elon to get to $1 trillion net worth. For Tesla, it has been reiterated many times by management at the company and Elon himself that the company will continue to grow 50% year over year, especially their automotive business. And although the rest of the company will likely grow more than 50% year over year, let's assume that in 2022, Tesla is going to do about $100 billion in revenue, which they are on track to do if they are going to do 1.5 million cars this year, plus other revenue from either solar, batteries, FSD, and everything else that they sell. If we take $100 billion and we grow it 50% year over year through 2025, we end up with roughly $337 billion in revenue. Now, to figure out how much money they would make on this $337 billion, we can assume about 25% net income. If we take the last quarterly earnings from Q1 of 2022, Tesla did about 19.2% in net income percentage, which is basically their bottom line. And for the next 3 years, it's very safe to assume that their manufacturing expertise will continue to get better, which means that they'll make more money on their cars in addition to full self-driving and potentially the bot. And there's also potential profitability from things like battery storage, solar panels, solar roof, things like that. And so 25% net income percentage off of their revenue is likely to be a safe assumption for 2025. That would leave us with roughly $84 billion in net income for 2025. If we apply a 50 price to earnings multiple on this number, we arrive at around $4.2 trillion market cap. A 50 price to earnings ratio in 2025 is also likely to be realistic since they're much higher than that today. They're over 100 PE as of this recording. And with their continued growth into the future, with the bot coming online, with full self-driving being taken up, there's a lot of potential for this PE to be even higher than 50. But for this exercise, let's assume 50 PE. If we take that $4.2 trillion valuation and we assume about $4 trillion, let's just round it down to $4 trillion just to make it easy, Elon's stake in the company goes from $151 billion to $700 billion, assuming that his 17% stake remains the same for the next 3 years. If you like what you're seeing so far, I would love it if you throw me a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show this to more people. Thank you very much. Now, for SpaceX being valued at around $100 billion today, I'm going to assume that the company will likely triple in valuation in the next 3 years. And the main reason is because of Starlink. There are many different ways to get to this $300 billion valuation, but let's do a quick and dirty one. Right now, SpaceX is worth about $100 billion with essentially $0 from their Starlink business. If we take a company like Verizon in the United States, they are valued at $200 billion, and they are a well-established communication company in this country. With Starlink being a global company, essentially there's no boundaries for that service. The user base for Starlink is likely to be much larger than Verizon's and much more profitable, especially since they would be 100% vertically integrated. They would own the rockets essentially that allow those satellites to go into space. There are many different valuation models that you can build for Starlink, assuming different size, but I'm going to use Verizon as a proxy. If we take Verizon's valuation and add it to SpaceX's current valuation and assume no growth in valuation from the rest of the business, we arrive at a $300 billion market cap. For comparison, Home Depot, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, and Nestle are all valued at about $300 billion. And so the question you could ask is SpaceX more valuable than those companies in 3 years' time when Starlink is fully live? And who knows, maybe Starship is sending people into space for tourism, or SpaceX could be sending people to the moon and other missions potentially that could be profitable from that perspective. And if we assume that Elon continues to have a 50% ownership stake in SpaceX, the value of his stake would be roughly $150 billion. If we take $700 billion and add $150 billion, we are already at $850 billion. As far as Boring Company and Neuralink and any other company that Elon decides to start between now and then, it's probably safe to assume that these companies are going to 10x from here till then. Since Boring Company and Neuralink are known to be at around a $1 billion valuation as of today's recording, a $10 billion valuation for these companies is likely to be super achievable given the valuable things that these companies are creating. Neuralink could potentially solve very, very, very serious medical conditions, and Boring Company could solve all the traffic issues that we have in major cities. That in itself is a huge value add to society. As a quick point of reference, Etsy and American Airlines are valued at around $10 billion, so it's not hard to see how Neuralink or Boring Company could be valued similarly to these companies by 2025. If we assume that these companies will 10x, then you can add another $10 billion to Elon's net worth, which is now at $860 billion. Now, for Twitter, this one I'm going to make a little bit of a leap and say that Twitter is going to be able to over 10x in the next 3 years. And the reason why I say this is because Twitter is 100% software, and the way that Elon runs his companies, they're extremely, extremely fast at making innovative changes and things that make their company super, super valuable. Software is going to be one of those things that's going to be the easiest to scale, and given Elon's background with PayPal and X.com and his software background and the AI work that they're doing in Tesla and the software work that they have to do in SpaceX, it probably stands to reason that Twitter at some point will likely become the most valuable social media company on planet Earth. And although I recognize 3 years time might be too fast, I still think this is very realistic because of how quickly you can scale software. If my assumption of Twitter becoming the most valuable social media company becomes true by 2025, let's go ahead and use Facebook as a proxy to understand what the valuation could be. As of today's recording, Facebook is valued at roughly $530 billion. And so if we assume Twitter will reach this valuation by 2025, that would be a 12x from Twitter's current valuation of $44 billion based on the private takeover deal that Elon has offered. If we assume that 20% stake in Twitter, Elon's stake would be worth roughly $109 billion, bringing his total net worth to roughly $969 billion. And if for his chump change, we assume that he has about 2% of his net worth laying around in cash or other assets, this brings his total net worth to roughly $989 billion. And any 1 to 2% swing in his valuations will put Elon at $1 trillion net worth. So let's put this within context. $1 trillion is a lot of freaking money. What does this mean? $1 trillion net worth would put Elon Musk as the richest entrepreneur in the history of the world world. As far as we know, I don't know what shady stuff's going on in other places, but as far as we know, $1 trillion would make Elon Musk the richest entrepreneur in the history of mankind. The next two would be Carnegie and Rockefeller, each of them having roughly $350 billion at their peak of their net worth, inflation adjusted to 2021, which means that Elon's net worth will be more than Carnegie's and Rockefeller's net worth combined, by about $300 billion. Here's another way to look at it. If Elon decided to become a country for whatever reason, he would be the 17th largest economy in the world by GDP. He would be slotted based on today's GDP between Indonesia and Turkey. And the value of his country, quote unquote, would be larger than Argentina, Switzerland, Saudi Arabia, and the Netherlands. But what does this actually mean when a person's net worth is equivalent to the 17th largest economy in the world? One of the obvious things here is that Elon's notoriety will go through the roof. He will not just become a great man of history by the sense of creating wealth for himself and the world, but he's also going to be a target for those that view this sort of wealth as a big negative. He will likely be hundreds of billions of dollars more wealthy than the next richest person on earth, probably by more than $500-600 billion by then. How would society view this amount of wealth? One of the big discussions in the United States is that there's parts of the political spectrum that are saying that having this much money is immoral in a way, that it's not right. So will those voices continue to grow as his wealth increases? Do we think there's going to be a shift in tone as there's more and more value created from his companies? Or is this yet another thing that certain political parties are going to try to make into a huge attack vector for Elon? How are nation states going to view this kind of wealth? Are there countries out there that could potentially be threatened by somebody that has this much economic power, so much so that he's in the top 20 of the most valuable countries on earth if we were to measure his net worth to a country's GDP? Or could there be an alternate reality where people could recognize that hitching your ride onto Elon, or essentially jumping on the train of technology creation, of innovation creation, of value creation, is not just good for Elon, but it could also be good for those that go with him on that mission? One of the things that Elon and his companies have proven in the past is that they know how to execute, and they know how to create value, and they know how to create wealth, and they know how to create things that are useful for society. So could more and more people join the sort of mantra that says, if you can't fight them, join them in this case, right? If you know there's going to be somebody out there that's going to be extremely good at creating value, could those people jump on the train or on the bandwagon per se, and then instead of having people fighting him, they enable his path towards that value creation? Could there be developments that are going to keep Elon from even reaching this number of $1 trillion net worth? One of my goals for this video is to just create discussion around one of the potential outcomes of Elon becoming a trillionaire. And even though right now we have a market condition where everyone's losing money in the stock market always rebounds at some point. At some point, we're going to see an increase in value for Tesla, SpaceX, and all the other companies that Elon's involved with. And when that happens, I think it's going to be good to be prepared for any of the potential outcomes that can come out of Elon becoming a trillionaire, and what are the risks and rewards of that sort of thing happening. We're living through some very fascinating times, but my gut tells me it's going to get even more fascinating. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you want to support the channel, I have many different ways you can do that in my description. You can become a patron, you can join the YouTube channel, or you can use my link to purchase Athletic Greens, which is a supplement that I use every single morning, which I really trust. Links for that in the description below, or the join button right below this video. Thanks again, and enjoy the featured song for today's video. Take it easy. Bye-bye.